In today's episode, we are going to talk about the power and the science of storytelling. What's going on, guys? This is Philip Sessions, your public speaking coach, here with Richard Newman. He is the founder of Body Talk. And over the past 22 years, his team has trained over 120,000 business leaders around the world to improve their communication and impact, including one client who gained $1 billion in new business in just 1 year using the strategies that Richard teaches. And today, he is actually going to go into the science and the strategy behind storytelling, which as a business owner and as a speaker is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And so, Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Great. Thanks, Philip. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So thanks for having me on the show. I've got to say, communication as a small business owner is the area that I'm most passionate about. So really happy to be here talking to you and talking to your podcast listeners as well. And as you mentioned, I've been running my business now for a couple of decades. But the reason I'm so passionate about communication is that I was really challenged with trying to figure out how to communicate when I was a kid. And I was aware of this from a very young age. So when I was 4, going on to be about 5 years old, we moved house. My family moved to a different area. I moved to a new school, and I found myself there really challenged with trying to just get to know the kids in my class and try and build up a connection, conversation, rapport with them. And as a result of that, I felt like I was almost living in this glass bubble, not quite sure how to connect with people. And so, as I went through my school years, was trying to develop better communication skills. And then when I got to about the age of 16, a friend of mine gave me a book called Body Language by Alan Pease, one of the classic works from back in the day. And I read that and I was just blown away by what I read there and fascinated by the topic, and decided to really invest my time into figuring out more about communication skills, and read somewhere around 200 books on the subject of communication over the coming years, on storytelling, which we'll talk about in this session, and body language and stage presence, and all sorts of other aspects of public speaking, which I found fascinating. And, it wasn't until recently that I really appreciated the challenge that I was going through, that I now coach a lot of people through. I was very shy as a kid. I'm very highly introverted. But I've also been recently diagnosed autistic, which essentially means that, the way that I communicate, the way that I see the world is slightly different to neurotypical people, and therefore the way I'd approach communication would be different. So I had all these challenges that I was dealing with, but I've been able to overcome those challenges through various different aspects of my life. And my passion is helping other people find their voice and be able to, get their message out there, get the results that they really deserve. And so that's been my passion all the way through my career. So hence why I'm so excited to speak to you and your listeners today.
Yeah, that's great. And we definitely have that same passion for helping people. And I love bringing people on with that same passion to share a different perspective, because as you know, you and I can share that same message and somebody will perceive it completely different. Or when you say it, it's like, oh, lights go off. It makes complete sense. And when I say it, it's like, whatever. Who cares about Philip? Like, he's just saying some stuff. So we really need to bring different people in. And I promise I didn't pay Richard for anything that he's doing here today. So if he starts saying stuff that I completely agree with, it's not because I paid him to do that. No, but Richard, excited to go into that and all the stuff that you have. Man, there's so many things really to unpack there. I'm actually curious because you mentioned about being autistic. How have you navigated that? Because I just think about that being, I don't want to call it a limiting factor, but it's definitely something that you have to overcome. And we all have certain things that we have to overcome. Some it's confidence, some it's just speaking poorly. So what are some things that you did or some tools that you use to help you overcome that?
So as I mentioned, this is sort of something that I wasn't aware of early on. So I was just trying to figure out communication. I could just see that my friends were connecting with people and having girlfriends and friendships that were developing in ways that mine weren't. And I was thinking there's something kind of missing here. I don't know what it is. And so, like I said, I started studying books on this, and then I think a pivotal part of my life is that when I was 18 years old and other friends of mine were going off to university, I decided I wanted to do something good for the world and also start to really investigate how I could improve my communication and help other people do the same. And so I ended up going to Northeast India, where I was living up in the foothills of the Himalayas in a Tibetan monastery, where I was teaching English to monks. And the big challenge that we had there is that they didn't speak any English when I arrived. They spoke Tibetan, Nepali, and Hindi. And I spoke a bit of French and a bit of German. And we realized very quickly we didn't have a language to connect with. And so we had to figure out, well, how are we going to connect with each other? And how was I going to teach them? And so on. How would we exist together in this monastery for 6 months? And I pretty soon realized that through body language and through tone of voice, I could understand them and I could connect with them in certain ways. So I developed these ways of running lessons with them. That was essentially communication non-verbally. And the biggest breakthrough I got is that I figured out I had to be totally congruent in my communication. Given that, say, for example, if I was trying to teach them the word excited, if I didn't look excited and I didn't sound excited, then they didn't know what the word meant. I could have been saying pineapple for all they knew. There's no way for them to know. And equally, I say this to people who are like business leaders or people who are selling on behalf of their teams these days, that, if you go into a meeting or a sales pitch and you're feeling nervous because you're afraid of public speaking, or you're afraid of pitching in some way, or you feel a challenge when you go into an interview, if you're feeling nervous or you're feeling stressed and you say, this is an amazing product, what they see is someone who feels stressed and nervous. And they go, why is he nervous about this product? What is it that he's not telling me? And so you have to make sure that everything is congruent. You've got to make sure you've got good delivery. You've got to have a great story. And you've got to have, the good tone of voice, understand how to handle the questions. Everything needs to go in the same direction. And so I learned that very quickly with the monks, which then pulled me into alignment of being super congruent when I was communicating in terms of building up my business. And that's something that was a particular challenge for me, if you like, with being autistic, because it's one of those pieces where very simple way I can explain to people what this is like for me is I don't understand banter. Or at least I didn't used to. So banter for me is when two people say offensive things towards each other and laugh in their faces, and they somehow improve their friendship through doing that. And I would look at that and think, oh, okay. So if I go up to this person, I insult them and laugh at them, then they're going to think I'm a great guy. So I try it, and that didn't go very well for me. So I had to just really break it down along the lines of, well, what's really happening there, and how can I do that? What are the elements that make this work? And it was really by breaking down those elements and thinking, okay, what works and what doesn't work, that helped me build my communication style. But up to the point where, when later on, as I was building my company, leaders would come to me saying, how do I have charisma? How can I have more gravitas when I go into this meeting? I'd say, okay, show me a presentation. And I'd say, great, let me look at this as if it's a wall. You're trying to build a wall, and that wall is gravitas. And I can tell you these 3 bricks are missing in the wall, because I've noticed them through observing other people. If you put those 3 bricks in, you go from where you are to having gravitas, which led all the way up to when I was, it was around 2016. I put a study together that's one of the biggest studies ever created on nonverbal influence, which was published in the journal Psychology, which was showing people these are the aspects that you need that can help anyone to increase their influence, increase their gravitas, increase their authority, and so on. So that was a big part of the journey for me. So it's actually been beneficial, if you like, that I've had a different lens on communication. So I've been able to observe neurotypical people, which is the average population, as an outsider and see, okay, what works about this, what doesn't work about it, and how can I then break it down and teach it? And, it's not just the nonverbal side. As you said, that the power of storytelling has been something I've been able to really address and observe and be able to break down for people and help them put that into action to win new business and to influence people and to cascade messages through their company and so on. So all of it I've actually seen from my perspective has been an advantage.
Yeah, and I like that you're using what most people would think as a disadvantage and turning that really into a superpower, because yes, it took you, we'll call it extra effort, to be able to learn that because of your different perspective on how you look and perceive things. But it's also became the superpower because now you can see from that outside perspective, which as a business owner, when you're in the business, you're in the trenches, it's hard for you to see where the company's going. So being able to pull back, and that's where a coach really comes in is helpful, because they're able to have that 30,000-foot view and see like what you're doing now and where you're going with that. And I love
Yeah.
going into speaking strategies with my clients, and I'm sure it's probably the same for you, that okay, you're speaking about this, but what you're speaking about is not getting you to where you're wanting to go. So let's change up these
Yeah.
couple of things. And then now it lines up, or it makes sense now, rather than you start at point A, you go to a point E, and then you're back to C, and then all of a sudden you're all the way over to Z, but then you want to come back to L real quick. It's like, well, let's go through the alphabet in order so people can follow along with you. Because as a business owner, we know every single thing going on, or most everything going on in business. And if we're trying to talk to somebody, let's say in the sales department, they don't know everything going on with the business. They know sales, they know, and hopefully they know the numbers of the sales projections and all that good stuff. And so we have to be able to communicate with them properly to be able to give that. So having that outside perspective, definitely a superpower for you, but can be a superpower for anybody for sure. And I missed our first question at the beginning because I wanted to ask that question, but I'm going to go back to it, my canned question, and that is, what is the definition of public speaking to you?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because, having worked with people on communication for the last couple of decades, I've actually seen the definition of public speaking change. So when I would first train clients and they'd come and say they wanted public speaking training, way back in the day, it meant that they wanted to improve how they came across when they spoke to a large room, probably a conference of people, while standing behind a lectern and pointing to slides. That's what public speaking was. And then, after about 10 years of helping people from that perspective of public speaking, where we're trying to ease them away from the lectern, like, don't hide yourself behind this box, don't let the slides do the work, come out from there. We then saw that business started to change what it felt public speaking really was, where, the rise of TED Talks and TEDx events meant that suddenly leaders thought, oh, public speaking is a bit more like, stand on a red carpet and, speak and tell a story. And so the requests we were getting around public speaking training was much more, how can I engage a room, maybe without slides and just through compelling storytelling? And then as I come up to sort of, where we are today, partly because of the pandemic, public speaking has actually gone to that place where it could be online, where people are, speaking en masse to their teams, where they might have 10,000 people live with them at a sort of a virtual conference they're speaking to, and they're doing it all through a lens and doing it through through a microphone as well. So public speaking, I really define as it's changed through the years as when you need to express a message to a large group of people. So you're not just having those one-to-one conversations or a small team meeting. It's something that goes beyond that. Be able to really effectively express something in a compelling way to a group of people, whichever the medium is that you're using.
I like that effective expression. That is super important, obviously, with speaking and communicating and everything. And speaking of that, well, when you were talking earlier, you were talking about connection. So I really want us to start going down that route, because in speaking, that is important, not just to be able to express yourself and your ideas, but to connect with your audience. Because COVID, I would say, is a big reason why there seems to be more and more of this push for connection. But also, I think as we get away from the baby boomers and even Generation X, where we're getting these younger groups come into the workforce, they need to feel like they're a part of this. They need to feel like they belong, they can fit in. And so this connection is more important versus like those baby boomers. Hey, go do this. Okay, cool. I'll do that. Or, XYZ is how you get to your goal or whatever you need to do. And okay, cool. Now with this new generation, they need more of that connection and that explanation and feel like they're not being talked at, but being talked with, kind of thing. So how do you go about connecting with people through speaking?
Yeah. So if you want to connect with people through speaking, then you essentially need to know how does the human mind work and how does it want to receive information? And I'd say that you're completely right that this need for connection has had this meteoric rise in demand over the last few years, where people have spent less time together. And even now, I find people who are really sociable, who used to be out all the time, are sort of reluctant to leave the house, thinking that they need to have a really good reason in order to get out there and, go and spend time rather than, even to go to the cinema rather than watch something at home, or to go out and connect with people. There's a reluctance I've seen from my highly extrovert friends who used to go out to parties every weekend and now think, can I be bothered to leave the house? So we have this rising need in how we connect with each other. So there's various ways that you can do that one-to-one, but if you need to connect with a group of people, this is going to come most easily through a couple of things. Of course, like your body language and your personal expression is important, but the need for really effective storytelling skills is something that is so important, particularly for business leaders, for managers, to be able to express a message that could be a complex message. Sometimes it could be quite dry information, or there could be challenging information to put across, and to make it clear, concise, and compelling for everyone to resonate with, even when you can't see their eyeballs, because so much of that public speaking is now happening where it's like it's a Teams meeting and you can't actually see the people on the other end. You've got to be able to connect with them through the process of storytelling. So a few things to say about this is that what I've noticed is a lot of businesses and a lot of business leaders go in the wrong direction when they hear the term storytelling. So, and I'm sure you've come across this, Philip, as well, many times, where some people, when they hear the idea of storytelling, they think it's about telling anecdotes. And so what they do is they put themselves at the center of the story and they say, let me tell you about what happened to me on the weekend, or let me tell you about this thing that I did 5 years ago. And it's about them, and it disengages the listener unless it's done in the right appropriate setting. And other times people think it's just about giving a list of information, or about talking about things that have happened in history. And it really doesn't have to be that. In order for storytelling to be really effective, there are three things that must happen to truly connect with the other person. And that is, you need to connect with three key areas of the mind, which is the survival part of the mind, then the emotional mind, then the logical mind. And you need to connect with those three in that order. And so, to think about, I loved how you said earlier, the idea of people jumping around, like they do the A of the alphabet, then the Z, then they go back to the L. And people leave those meetings feeling confused. Like, I couldn't even follow that. I'm not really sure why I heard that information. I'd equally say that, a lot of times people go into a meeting and they hear a lot of logical information, and the boss thinks, well, that's great, I shared the logic. And they leave feeling disengaged because it didn't engage the survival mind or the emotional mind that cares about information and helps us make decisions. And so you've got to make sure you're engaging those three areas in that order, so that people initially engage with you and think, oh, this sounds important. This is probably worthwhile me listening to. Then the emotional mind gets engaged and says, this is fantastic. I want to know more. Tell me the information. Give me the KPIs. Give me the percentages that I need to know about next quarter. And then you land them with the logic and they think, wow, that's fantastic. I've got a story of information. When they leave the meeting, the idea, if you've really connected with them, is if Bob next week says to them, hey, what was that meeting about last week with Sheila? What was that all about? They should immediately be able to retell what happened. Just like you could, if you saw a movie on the weekend and people said, hey, what did you do? And you could retell what happened in the plot, the subplot, the characters, phrases they said that you liked. And you can do that with a movie years later, because it engages the survival mind, emotional mind, and logical mind. And then you can sort of go back and flow through that memory in that order.
And that's so good. I'm glad you brought up those 3 points. And that is such an important thing, because when you just give data, most people can't remember that. There are some people out there that they're data driven. That's all. They love data, so they kind of have that built-in emotion to them. And I guess really that survivor side of them as well, because they survive and thrive and love data. So then you give them the actual data and they're salivating over it. But most people are not that way. So you have to give them, like you said, that survival instinct. You have to feed that, and then feed those emotions, and then finally give them that data. And it's definitely a tough thing, especially like engineering companies. And I know you work with some technology companies and stuff like that, because it's obviously data, it's engineering, it's numbers, it's math, all that fun stuff there that they do need, but you do have to go. So can you share a story perhaps to kind of help people really understand this more within practice, where maybe you've done this before, to help connect with that audience or help somebody, a leader, connect with their team?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a couple of things to say on that. Firstly, you were mentioning there people who really emotionally connect with data, what I noticed with them is that they turn data immediately into a story in their minds. So, for example, you could go into a meeting and you could say, "Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming here. The data from last week shows that we are at 5.67%. And there'll be people in the room who care about the data where they think the world is about to end. My survival mind is suddenly kicking in. We've got to do something about this. And so they're suddenly like intuitively there because they've turned that into a story about understanding the context and the definition of that and what that might mean right now, what it would mean if they don't change anything about it in the future. So this story comes up. And whereas you can go into other people and they go, okay, well, that sounds fine. 5.67%. I don't mind. I don't even know what that means. So that's where they're turning it into a story. So from our perspective, we work with lots of people in engineering companies, telecoms. We work with marketing insights companies. We work with pharmaceutical companies as well, who are taking the data of a treatment landscape of all the different treatments possible for oncology patients, for example. And they have to take the latest data and help key opinion leaders in the field understand what that data even means. So that is often about translating it into a story of saying, okay, some people in the room will know that 5.67% is a good thing, or they'll know that it's a bad thing. That's great. For everybody else, we need to build a story to explain what is the relevance of that information, why should they be concerned about it right now, and what will happen if they don't move forwards and take some action on this. So that's sort of part of the process. To give you another aspect of the storytelling piece and how this has helped people, you mentioned in my introduction there about how we helped one company win over £1 billion worth of business in the space of a year by helping them with their storytelling skills. There was another client this was an American company, and it's the largest deal we've helped somebody win. This is one single deal where we helped them win a deal worth about $800 million was this one piece. And they were aiming to build a new building on the bank of the River Thames in London. This was the project. And they've been working towards it for about a year, maybe 18 months at this point. And they brought us in for the last sort of 2 weeks before the final pitch. And they knew they were down to the last 3 places. But they were in third out of the 3, and they needed to turn that around. And so they came to us, and we were working on various aspects of the story, going through, okay, let's work on survival, emotional, logical pieces. Let's make sure they are there. But then the other key piece that we had to transform is that the CEO showed up for a rehearsal. This was the day before the pitch. And we were there rehearsing in this big sort of glass and steel building that was across the Thames from where they were hoping to build this new project. And he started to deliver his information, and it was maybe like 5 p.m. and the pitch was the next morning at 9 a.m. And I had to stop him after like 2 minutes. And I said to him, I don't think you really believe in this pitch. And the whole room sort of turned to look at me like, you can't speak to our CEO this way. What are you doing? And they looked at me and they looked back at him. And I said to him, like, tell me, do you really believe you're going to win? And he said, no. And it was like all the oxygen sort of left the room. And I said, can you explain to me why you don't think you're going to win? Because I was picking up on this on his delivery. Like there was no conviction really behind it. And there was a bit of tension behind his delivery. And he said, the reason we're not going to win is because somebody on the decision-making panel has decided that they don't like James, let's call him, on our team. And so because these two don't get on, that means that they're now dead set against us and they're giving us negative scores, and it's all going to go poorly after all the work that we've done. So I've come in here to save this situation so that we can try and do our best tomorrow, even though we're probably not going to win. And so I said to him, let's talk about storytelling around this piece. Is it fair to say that if we look at storytelling characters, that you would say potentially you've been brought in as the hero, because every story needs a hero, the hero who is aiming to save the situation from what's happening? And he said, yeah, I think that's fair to say. I've had to fly over here. I've had to come out of my way to try and win this. And I said, so would you say that your company is maybe a victim? If we go for another storytelling archetype, they're the victim of a tough situation. And he said, that's right. They absolutely are the victim of a bad decision and so on. I said, so you tell me now, who's the client in the story? You're the hero, the team's the victim. Who's the client? Is it fair to say that they would be seen as the villain in this situation? And he said, well, yes. And you could see this realization on his face of, yeah, that doesn't sound good. I shouldn't go in with that. I said, if you go in feeling that in the story that you're telling, you're the hero, the team's the victim, and the panel you're pitching to are the villain of the situation, there's no chance that they're going to react well. You're not going to get the deal. Mm. So I said, could we shift the dynamic of how the story is positioned so that you're no longer the hero? And so many business leaders, so many people who pitch, they put themselves as the hero of the story, or their service is the hero, or their product is the hero, their company is the hero in some way. And it's just the wrong positioning. So I said to him, could we shift this around such that the client who's making the decision is the hero of the story? They've got a challenge, they've got a building they need to create, and they've got goals that they want to achieve. Just like any hero, they want to get past all the challenges of getting there and have this highly profitable project they want to work on. Could you position them as part of this pitch, that they're the hero going from challenges towards those goals? And so we rethought the way that they were framing up this discussion so that the client was the hero rather than this guy. And then they managed to run it much more effectively. And I wasn't there on the day of the pitch, but they managed to move to a place where they went from third place up to first place. So it's a dynamic that I like to help people with, of understanding if there's one thing they can shift about their storytelling, you've got to get the structure right, but you've then got to get the dynamic of the delivery right. So coming back to your point on connection, that's how you can get really connected with people, because we connect with stories where we feel a connection with the hero. Whoever that protagonist is in the story, we see ourselves in them, and we see how they're making choices reflected on how we make choices as well. And so to get people really connected with the story, you've got to let them see themselves in the story in a positive way.
Man, that is powerful right there. It made me think of going in a sales conversation. A lot of times, especially for us right here, we're trying to help people with public speaking coaching, and we could easily go in the conversation. Yeah, you get the client to come to you, or a potential client come to you and say, I really just need help. I'm struggling with this, that, and the other. And oh yeah, I can help you out with that. No problem there. And you have all the confidence in the world. But you and I would be coming in as this hero type, and we're going to come in and save this victim and make them into something great. And we're not going to make them into the hero. We're just going to make them better and put them in a better spot than they are now. And while that will still convict some people to buy, if instead we came to them and we're really kind of like that sage advisor, we're the mentor to them, and like, hey, we're going to help you along the way and let you be the hero of your own story, that's going to convict them even more to want to work with us. And so you can translate that into any business, any product, any service that you use. If you bring that customer in with that story and show them that when they have your product or your service, you're simply mentoring them to where they're trying to go, but complementing what their abilities already with your product or service will allow them to be the hero of their story and their journey. Wow, that is just a powerful thing. I like that a lot.
Great. It's really reminded me actually of a story I don't often get to tell, but it's how where I realized in public speaking that the real key to having a great impact on an audience was to make them the hero, is that I literally did that. So, I often get booked as a motivational speaker. I get to go and speak on big stages at conferences and so on, which is always a joy. But I was always thinking, I want to make sure that the person who's booked me feels like I've done a good job. And the best indication I've done a good job is you get a standing ovation at the end, because there's no arguing with the fact that the audience have clearly loved that experience. The first time I managed to get multiple standing ovations in a session was when I was booked by a company to do a talk. It was about 800 people in the room, something like that. And she went to book me for this talk, and she said, could you show up for like half an hour? And she laid out what she wanted me to achieve. And I said, that's not going to be half an hour. That's going to be like 3.5 hours. And she said, who do you think you are, Madonna? You're going to show up and perform for 3.5 hours? I said, just trust me. It's interactive. They're going to love it. And so I did this session, which I think ended up being like 3.25 hours, something like that. But the way that I built in these multiple standing ovations is that I made the audience the hero. And at one point, I took a guy who was in the audience up onto stage and was giving him live coaching on his own public speaking skills. And it was him that generated the multiple standing ovations, not me, because the whole audience then saw themselves on stage through his eyes as I was taking him through different activities. and they loved it. And he actually ended up, based on the talk that I coached him to do, they felt it was so effective. They then sent him to Las Vegas to go and pitch what I'd coached him to work on to the CEO of the company, who then said he liked it enough that he paid for this guy and his family to get relocated to Singapore to set up a new branch of the company. Like, it's sort of, it's a nice hero's journey for him. But I suddenly realized that the key behind this was, rather than me being up there aiming to motivate them, it was making sure that they see themselves in the entire scenario. And then, he got, I think he got 3 standing ovations and I got 1 at the end or something like that. So, allowing people, whoever you're speaking to see themselves as the hero of the situation is the ticket to that sense of real connection with your message.
That is awesome. That's awesome that you did that, and really, if you will, stood up for yourself and said, like, "Hey, I need this time," and then bringing that person on. That's huge, and that's actually something that I've been trying to figure out, because actually this Friday from our recording, I've got a networking event and I'm doing talking about elevator pitches, and I'm actually going to use that same concept now because I like that, and bring somebody up and hey, let's actually work through your elevator pitch right here, because I can tell you and just talk to you, but I'm not going to connect as well and it make as much sense. But if I start talking to you about it and using that person, that's going to be so much more powerful. And that's literally what you did. So I really like that you did that. And so for the audience, try and incorporate some way of bringing somebody in. And a lot of times this would be somebody that works for you. Is as you're having these team meetings and as you're speaking with your team and you're talking about new initiatives, bring them in, ask them for their feedback. I see too many leaders too often, and I've talked to too many, that they basically say what's going to happen. They've already went to these closed rooms, they've made all these decisions, and now they're just letting you know what's going on. If they would have just even brought up, hey, what do you think? We're going to be talking about this soon, this topic. We want to, move forward with a certain, we'll call it a system or technology. What do you think? You're going to have those people that are on the ground floor, so to speak, the worker bees that will poke holes in this all day long and let you know. And now that leader can go back to the other leadership or senior management and talk about it. And now the workers feel like they have buy-in because they were actually able to give input back on that. So kind of that same concept, but something that you could really put into practice there in your own business as well. Because too often I've seen too many leaders just think that, well, I've got to figure it out myself. I've got to do it myself. I'll just let the team know what's going on. And that kills morale. Or it maybe doesn't quite kill it unless if you continue you're doing this and you keep putting your foot down kind of thing. And people understand there are times where it's just hey, this is the direction we're going. Okay, understood. But if you do that every single time, you start losing that connection and really losing that culture in the company. And to boost that morale, boost that company culture, to me, that is a great way to do that, to get that input and feedback from your employees.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And I'm sure you've seen this, Philip, many times, but I've always been talking to clients about making conferences interactive. So, I saw too many back in the day where, the first person who stands up is the CEO and they say, hey, everybody, this is where we are and this is where we're going. And then the CFO stands up and says, this is what the numbers were last year and this is what the numbers will be next year. And then the COO stands up and then they talk about, this is the update on the operations and we're heading over here. And then people go to coffee and they need the coffee because they're like, I've just sat there and passively listened. And, I don't feel like I'm really involved in this. And what they could have done was just created a memo on those 3 talks and said, here's an update for you, everybody, before the conference. Now, when we get there, we're going to have something lively, something interactive. So I'm always talking to clients about saying, what can we do to make your conference interactive? How can we show up and do something where people are learning, they are connecting with each other, they are developing skills, they're sharing ideas with each other, because people are too rarely together these days. So if they are together, then make sure they feel like they're together and they're not just, maybe watching. What they could do is watch a movie of the CEO just, giving a pre-prepared talk on this is the updates. In order to make it valuable when people are together these days, you have to make sure you're really, truly connecting with them and making them part of that experience so they feel super valued as they go through that conference or team meeting.
Yeah, and nothing is worse for really anybody than to go to a meeting that could have been summarized in an email. You spend an hour in a meeting, and then I just think about that too, especially as a business owner. You look around in the room, and you're like, okay, that person's probably making 50 grand. That person's probably making 100 grand. That person's making 150 or whatever that is. And you go around that room, and you're like, man, you break that down to an hourly rate. You're like, that's a couple grand here. That's like 10 grand just sitting here for an hour. And I could have sent an email, would have taken them 5 to 10 minutes to read, would have saved tons of money. And we could have came in together afterwards, like, hey, make sure you read this before you come in, or we have a quick 5-minute video to go over something and then really get into that. And so with this interactive scenario, and you gave us one, obviously, can you share one maybe that's on a more day-to-day basis versus on the big stage that we could use as business owners to be more interactive with our employees as we have meetings?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I mean, I love getting more interactive with people, and I've actually really enjoyed exploring how you do it in person and how you do it virtually. And so, with the virtual sessions that I run, I'll have somewhere between sort of 50 people up to the biggest sessions we've done are around 3,000 people. And I'm always keen to make sure that I can make those interactive. So to do that sort of scale of things, we'll use interactive software. And essentially, it's about ask, don't tell. And so rather than just telling people, hey, these are the numbers for last quarter, these are the numbers for next quarter, being interactive and asking people questions, setting up quizzes around it, building curiosity around things is a great way to bring people in, to really get them to think, do I know where we were? Do I know where we're going? Do I know why we're going there, before you even discuss what's been planned or what's happened, or have that debate with them. So asking people, building curiosity into pieces, I think is a great way to go. And even if you have hundreds of people, so when I've done, virtual sessions with more than 1,000 people, because of the interactive software that's out there and available, I highly recommend Mentimeter if people are doing large sessions, because it's so fun and it's anonymous, and you don't have to download anything. You can take part. I'm not paid to promote it, but I really genuinely think it's great. So you can get a level playing field, where what I really enjoyed about it is that you can know what every person's thinking. That you can get messages from people about what they really care about, what they want from you as a speaker right now. And it's almost like a choose your own adventure as you go through the talk. So it doesn't have to be the way you thought the talk was going to go. It can be changing direction based on the mood and the feel of the audience as you go through. So that's more on a large scale. If you've got a smaller meeting, and if people are dealing with people in the room where they are aiming to connect with a smaller team of people, I also talk about, if you're asking questions, there's really 3 levels of questions that you want to be asking people about to get a true in-depth, meaningful, purposeful interaction. So you can have level 1 questions, which is sort of surface level questions, which are more around sort of facts, data, and context, where if you're aiming to get a group discussion going, as you mentioned earlier about how do you make sure that people feel involved in where the company is going, or what's happening? So level 1 questions just set the context of, could you share with me from your side of the business, what the numbers were last week? And could you share from your side on that project you're working on, where are we aiming to get to by the end of December? So you're getting facts and data from people. So there's a discussion of facts, and that's great. But if you stay there, it just feels a bit empty. It feels like numbers that could just be sent in a text. Once you've done that, though, you've set the stage for people being able to share information, and they feel like it was straightforward to do, and they haven't been asked to open up too much, so they feel a level of comfort. Once you've done that with a group, you can then go to level 2 questions, and if you've known them for a long time, you might be able to go there straight away, which is more emotions and opinions. And, with a group that doesn't know each other well or hasn't been together a lot, having level 1 questions is an important starting place. So they build up comfort with each other. They build up trust. They've heard their voice in the room and it was received well. Then you can get into level 2 questions, where you talk about emotions, opinions, thoughts that people have around things. And so you freed them up on that idea of, you can share your voice. We will listen to you. You're open to say what you feel here. And so you're much more likely to have an important bouncing of ideas between people as they really share, okay, these are the numbers, but this is how I'm feeling right now. The numbers might be going up, but I'm feeling like, the state of our company is going down. or it could be the other way around. The numbers don't represent it, but I feel excited about the future. I really, think that if we head in this direction, it's going to bring things back around, and you can get people excited and having a good, strong conversation with emotional questions. Like, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? What impact would it make if this happened? What could be the consequences over here? Getting them on that sort of conversation gets a lot of energy going. And then the deeper question to get to is more about, this is level 3, where you get into more sort of survival level of questions of understanding from people, what do they really actually care about? What are their values that are driving what's important to them in the business? Or if you're speaking to a client, what values are important to them in the buying decisions they might make with working with you? Because once you understand those pieces, then it makes sense of the whole rest of the picture. Because you might be thinking, okay, I've shared with you as my team an idea that's going to save time and save money, and you're all saying no. So clearly there's something deeper behind this that I need to understand about what matters to all of you for us to move forward. Same goes with the client. You're sharing with them something that would save them time and make them money, and they still say no. So you need to know what is the deeper element that matters to them. And you can only do that by asking questions. You can't do it if you go into a pitch or you go into a team meeting with a set slide deck of 40 slides you're definitely going to show. And no matter what happens, you're going to share that and you say questions at the end. So you're sort of hoping that people are still awake by the end of the session. You want to be going in with, yes, there could be pre-prepared content, but asking questions that really get people to think and to interact with you all the way through.
I like that. Yeah, asking questions is so important. And something I think about too with that, with asking a question, is you can ask before you give the answer to see if people understand or what their thoughts are. Because if you're like, hey, how do you think sales are going this quarter? Oh man, they're great. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. Like, they're in the tank right now. We're down 30%. Like, why do you think they're great? And you can kind of get that feedback. And of course, don't come in judging them and everything, but understand that so you can understand where they're coming from. And that really gives you understanding of, have I been preaching the right message? Have I been sharing our goals enough? Because if maybe your sales are at, they're technically up 30% from last quarter, but your goal was 50% from last quarter. And you know this with speaking German, probably Germans are notorious for this, where nothing's ever good enough. It always needs to be better. It's all, we could be better. We could be better, even if you do great. And that may be your mindset as the business owner, that like, yeah, we did 30% better than last quarter, but we wanted 50. So it wasn't great. Like, yeah, it's good, but it could be great. But your salespeople are like, oh, this is great. We're doing the best we've ever done, but and hit our goal. So you want to make sure you're also, so asking that question, it gives a calibration of where they're at, but then you can recalibrate them and say, hey, I'm glad that you're excited about this, but our goal was this. So we need to make sure we go up there and meet that, rather than being satisfied with this. And then the fact that it gets you all on the same page as well. So asking the questions, super important thing. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I agree with that completely.
Yeah. It makes me think of a principle I often talk to people about for public speaking, which is the idea of riding the ocean. So what I used to do, I trained as an actor when I was younger. I went to a London acting school. And what I realized I was doing wrong to begin with, so I would learn my lines, but I wouldn't just learn the line. I would decide how I was going to deliver that line. I'd read it to myself 100 times and go, that's the one. That's how I'm going to deliver it. Then I'd get into the scene and I'd deliver it that way, no matter what the other people on stage were doing, how they delivered their lines, how they felt the scene might go. And then I'd just be waiting for them to finish. And then I'd go, here's the delivery of my next line. And it had no connection. And so the acting teacher had to say, like half of acting is reacting. You're supposed to listen to them. And then like the delivery of your line comes from that reaction. I was like, really? Wow. So I'm supposed to be like connecting with them even when I don't have a line. I'm supposed to like be in the scene. Yes, Richard. So that was a huge lesson for me, which I now bring into public speaking, which is where like sometimes, like I mentioned, I get often booked as like a motivational speaker. And so I can go in there. I remember I used to go in thinking, right, that's it. I have to go up there and be like so energized. And the whole audience is going to be like really pumped from the first thing that I say. And I realized then there were some meetings I went into where the speaker before me might have just announced there was going to be redundancies, or I forget if you use redundancy as a word in the States. Like there was people going to be fired, or a restructure of the company. And then I'm going in as the motivational speaker. And you can imagine if I go up there like doing rah-rah speaking from the beginning, it's not going to work. So I talk about this as riding the ocean. So you sort of practice how you're going to pop up on a surfboard while you're on the beach, and you get your technique there. But when you go out onto the ocean, you have to actually feel the ocean. So, if you start jumping up on your surfboard like there's huge waves and the ocean is still, well, you're not going to end up having the result that you wanted there. Same goes if you're imagining that it's still and it's really choppy. You've got to feel what the ocean is like. And so, as you were mentioning, as the suggestion there, Philip, that idea of sounding out how people feel about the current state of the company and what the numbers are doing and so on, before you dive into saying, these are the numbers and this is how you should feel about it, is going to allow you to feel the ocean and to know how then to move forwards. And it will also dictate your tone, your body language on landing that message, because you could come in and just be all super excited about something. When you say it, people might say, well, I don't care about that. And that's not good for me, because the thing I really care about is this thing over here. So yeah, you've really got to make sure you're connecting with where are people right now, how do they feel, and then land your message based on that, just like I learned from those acting days.
Yeah, so true. Well, Richard, I want us to get to our last question. This has been a ton of great information. I love storytelling, asking questions, connecting. All of that stuff is so important in public speaking. But I'm curious, what is the message that you would share if you could only share one message for the rest of your life? What would that message be?
Yeah, so for me, I think this is about seeing someone's greatness. And what I mean by this, I think it's so powerful as a gift that you can give to people around you to create a ripple effect that you'll never even know how far it goes. Is that when I was just before I started my business, I was sitting in my hair salon, getting my hair cut, and I was working as an out of work sort of actor. And I was interested in body language and communication and so on. I had these different aspects I was keen on. My hairdresser said to me, "Hey, Richard, what do you do? What do you do for a living? What are you interested in?" And I talked to him about, well, I've studied acting. I taught English to monks across in India. I'm reading these books on body language. And he said, "How about I give you a free haircut and you come and teach my hairdressers?" And I said to him, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. And he said, "No, you'll figure it out. I see this as something that you could really do." And what was amazing about it is that I think it was about a week or 2 weeks before that, I'd gone to a recruitment company to try and find work because I wasn't getting work as an actor. And they said to me, "The only thing you're qualified for is lifting furniture. That's the only thing, carrying heavy furniture into a van." I said, "Come on, there must be something else, like a sales job, a marketing job. I've got skills, I've got charisma." And they said, "You don't have the qualifications for that. Lifting furniture is it." And so there I was, just a few days later, in this hair salon. This hairdresser said to me, "I see you doing this. I'm going to give you a free haircut. You're going to come back in and you're going to teach them for a couple of hours." And at first, I left there thinking, "Oh my God, that's so stressful. I can't imagine doing that." And then I thought, I really appreciate the fact that he's seen this in me, something that I couldn't imagine doing myself. And so I went back in there and I delivered it. And I was terrified from the start to the finish. But I got to the end of it and they liked it. And they said, "Can you come back and do some more?" And so I went back and did some more. And one thing led to another through sort of word of mouth that then led me to building this company now, where we've trained over 120,000 people, as you mentioned, people all the way around the world. And I bumped into my hairdresser many years later, maybe like 10 years later. I was at the airport. And I took a picture with him underneath the sign that sort of shows all the different destinations and when the flight's going to take off. And I said to him, "I want to take a picture with you here," because I said, if you look at that sign, I've been to virtually every destination that's on that board there because of you, because you saw something in me I didn't know I had. And now clients all over Europe, all over the world have booked me to go and work in those destinations because you saw something in me I didn't know I had. And that was such a gift to me. And so I would encourage people, particularly as business leaders, as entrepreneurs who may be listening to this, if you can do that for somebody, whether it's a member of your family or somebody that works for you, or even a client in a conversation, if you see something in them that they don't know they have, it's such a gift to give them that you'll never know years later how much that meant to them and how much they were able to go on and then achieve in the legacy that comes after that. So I'd say, as far as you can in every situation, aim to see someone's greatness.
Mm. I love that. And I completely agree with that message. I've definitely been blessed by people that saw something in me and have given to me. And I do that where I can and plan to continue to do that as well as myself. I love that
Mm.
message. And Richard, if people want to follow you, where's the best place for them to follow you to be able to see more of what you're putting out there?
Sure. So probably the best place to go to is if people go to liftyourimpact.com /the book. So that's the name of my new book, Lift Your Impact. So liftyourimpact.com /the book. And if you go down that page, it tells you about the book. But at the bottom, you can get the first 25 pages of the book for free if you just sort of fill in the form. And that sort of starts you on the journey of some of the techniques that I teach to clients. So that's a great place to go. People can also go, if they're interested more about the wider work that me and my team do, they can go to ukbodytalk.com. And then I'm available on LinkedIn, Richard Newman from Body Talk. And I also put out lots of content on Instagram at Richard Newman Speaks.
Awesome. Well, Richard, thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much valuable information. We appreciate it.